Nighttime. A dark apartment. Two men moved around in the shadows. Both wore black clothes. One handed the other a ski mask.
Put it on. You don't want them to remember your face. I thought you said they wouldn't see us. With any luck, they won't. I don't know why I let you talk me into this. Shut up. Get the rest of the stuff. Here, take this.
The lead man handed the second man a large knife.
We got the wire cutters? Okay, let's go.
They drove to a dead end, stopped the car, and got out.
The house is through those backyards. Follow me.
The second man started to jump a fence.
Don't go that way. There's a big dog in that yard.
The dog growled a warning. They hurried on, entering into the backyard of a huge house. There were roses all around the fences, flower beds everywhere. The two men crouched. One looked at the other, jittery.
I can't go through with it. I just lost my nerve. You can't back out now. We'll be in and out in 5 minutes. Now keep quiet and follow my lead.
Harvey jumped the fence. Ken followed. Harvey pulled out clippers, then began cutting flowers and tossing them into a big bag. Ken went after the roses, clearing out a whole wall of them in seconds. Harvey turned to Ken.
Psst! Go for the snapdragons. She loves snapdragons.
And within minutes, the backyard was completely denuded. Harvey grabbed the big bags of flowers and was over the fence again in seconds. But Ken couldn't get his leg over the fence. He fell into the roses and yelped in pain. Harvey gestured impatiently.
Come on, Ken, let's cheese it.
Harvey helped Ken over as lights went on in the house. The two men disappeared into the night. A man and a woman appeared at the back door. She gasped. Oh, Lordy Herb, our flower bed's been robbed. Glenvale Nursing Home next morning. A crowd of jolly elderly people squeezed in Elvira Peachtree Callahan's room singing Happy Birthday. Elvira was celebrating her 75th. Description of her later. What you should know now is that standing among the cluster of smiling elderly folks were Harvey and Ken. And now, in the harsh light of the nursing home, we get a better look. Charismatic Harvey is in his late 20s, not very well dressed, and in desperate need of a haircut. Ken, on the other hand, looks about 20 and dresses like a Mormon relaxing around the house. You know, sweater vest, clip-on tie, every hair in place, reeking of Lavorus. After a moment the singing stopped. Harvey and Ken looked at each other. Then Harvey leaned over and gave Elvira a peck on the cheek. Elvira, what was it you said you wanted for your birthday?
Flowers. You know how I so love flowers, dear. I do miss my garden.
Ah, yes, flowers, but how many?
Oh, a roomful. So everywhere I looked, I'd see flowers.
Your wish is my command, m'lady. And then, on cue, Harvey and Ken left the room and returned, each carrying 2 vases of flowers, and they continued bringing in vases until the room was filled with flowers and there was hardly room for the people. Elvira clapped her hands in delight and started to cry.
Oh, Harvey, I've seen nothing like this since that time that my dear Andrew...
Harvey hugged Elvira. Ken watched, smiling a strange smile, as Harvey produced a chain of flowers and began wrapping it around Elvira's head like a crown. A Rose by Any Other Name. Written and narrated by Meg Langford. My name is Ken. Kenneth Wenzel. The guy hugging the old rod, crowning her silver hair with violets. Keep your eye on him. He's the one who ruined my life. Because of him, I lost my girl, totaled my car, ruined my future, and got a lousy B in sociology from a professor who's supposed to be the easiest grader on campus. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is not really my story. It's his. His name is Harvey. Told me he was named after the rabbit, whatever that means. Keep your eye on him and check for your wallet when he leaves the room. Did I mention he was the one who ruined my life? I just thank God he got to me in time. But now we must back up in time a little, to a few months before this oddest of odd couples knew each other, and before this strange love triangle, if you will, came about. Harvey's rented room. The room looked like Saigon after Tet. The place was strewn with food boxes, beer cans, dirty clothes, dirty magazines. Books, magazines, and newspaper clippings were piled high, and tablets filled with scribbling were strewn everywhere. A pile of clothing on the sofa bed moved. Harvey emerged, hungover. His eyes looked like two piss holes in the snow. He groaned and grabbed his clock. 9:40! Damn it, I overslept. I'm missing Andy. Harvey ran to the TV and turned on the Andy Griffith Show. Barney was in the middle of giving Otis a sobriety test. Harvey laughed, not taking his eyes off the screen as he went to the kitchenette to grab himself some Frosted Flakes. A few vintage black-and-white early 60s comedies later, Harvey trudged out to fetch the mail in his pajamas. His wizened old landlady leered at his naked upper torso. A flood of letters awaited. Bills, letters from various magazines and publishers. Harvey came back to his room and found an envelope under the door that he'd missed. A notice that his rent was overdue. Harvey snorted and wadded it up in denial. Then he eagerly opened the letters from assorted magazine publishers. Field and Stream. Dear Mr. Fleming, thank you for your article on alternative bait sources for trout fishing in the event of nuclear war. We regret that it does not meet our current needs. Sincerely, Stanley K. Munsey. Car and Driver. Mr. Fleming, thank you for submitting your article, Samurai Influence in the Automobile Industry. Unfortunately, we only accept query letters. Best of luck in your future endeavors. The Editors. House and Garden. Dear Mr. Fleming, thank you for your delightful article on Martin Luther King Day topiary creations and the accompanying how-to illustrations. We will keep your article on file should we have need for it in the future. Maybelle Wilkins. Harvey sighed discouragedly and opened the last one from Interfaith Underground Publications. Mr. Fleming, thank you for submitting Jewish Girl, Catholic Boy, Interdenominational Orgasms. Our editors are interested in publishing it in our September issue. Harvey read it in disbelief, then reread it, then let out a whoop of joy. Well, a few minutes later, Harvey was cruising down an empty country road in his '87 Cutlass, singing at the top of his lungs. Celebrating, he drank champagne from a Slurpee cup, when suddenly, lights and sirens. Harvey cursed. And now we must leap ahead in time, where we find ourselves in the county courthouse. Harvey was dressed in a slightly rumpled but expensive suit and wearing a Winnie the Pooh and Friends silk necktie. The police officer that had arrested Harvey was giving an account of Harvey's arrest, when suddenly Harvey jumped up and interrupted. But, sir, it was a damn fine French champagne. Doesn't good taste count for anything any more? The judge scowled at the shaggy young man. And so, after a brief stint in jail, Harvey found himself traveling by Shanksmere and occasionally taking the bus. Less than a week after being released from jail on a beautiful summer's day, Harvey was standing at the bus stop, whistling, reading a book, looking at a bank clock. 12:55. He glanced around the parking lot and saw a little white terrier in a big white car. It yapped at passers-by. Harvey frowned. The yapping grew louder. Harvey looked up at the blazing sun, then at the car. The windows were rolled up tight. The little dog scratched frantically at the window. Harvey shook his head sadly and returned to his book. Time passed. The clock read 1:10. Harvey looked for his bus, then looked at the car. No yapping dog. Harvey jogged to the car and peered in. The little dog was lying on the seat, panting, looking up woefully at Harvey. Harvey tried the doors and looked around for the owner. He ran to a nearby dry cleaner's and returned with a hanger. He hurried to the car, bent the hanger, wedged it in, and with a little jiggling pulled the lock. Just as he reached for the little dog, he heard a woman shrieking. She ran across the parking lot, waving her arms. "Help! Police! He's stealing my car!" Harvey looked up, then picked up the dog and cradled it in his arms. And so, once again, Harvey found himself in the county courthouse. Harvey and his court-appointed lawyer sat in court waiting. The judge came out of his chambers. His eyes widened when he saw it was Harvey. "You again?" Harvey's lawyer did a half-hearted job of pleading Harvey's case. "My client claims he had no intention of stealing the car, Your Honor. He says he broke into the car to save the dog." The judge butted in before the lawyer could continue. "Has the dog been taken to a vet?" Yes, sir. It states here the vet said the dog has heat prostration, dehydration, and possible brain damage." The judge glowered at Harvey. "Breaking into the car was no way to deal with this problem, young man. You should have notified that—" "There was no time, sir. That poor dog—" "Don't interrupt me. No jail this time, but I'm assigning you 500 hours public service. Anyone who shows his face in my court twice in 6 months is asking for trouble, young man. Now get out of here." And so that is how Harvey found himself spending several hours a day in the Glendale Old Folks' Home. Dr. Barry Goldblum studied the court order and eyeballed Harvey. "Nurse Pritchards will explain your duties. And don't get any ideas about ripping off the prescription drugs. They're locked up tighter than Fort Knox." "Yes, sir." "Why the hell they send you guys here is beyond me. What happened to you guys picking up trash on the highways?" I really wouldn't know, sir." "I've got things to do. You got any questions?" "Just one, sir. Nurse Pritchards, is she attractive?" The doctor glared. The door opened. It was Nurse Pritchards, and the answer was no. And now we must switch gears once again, across town, far from the county courthouse and the neighborhood of cheap rented rooms, to the uppity part of town where the rich folks lived, and a quaint college with vine-covered buildings sits nestled. A shaggy professor in an ancient corduroy suit paced as he lectured his students on this, the first day of class. The students, already bored and dreading the next 16 weeks of this yawner, rolled their eyes, fidgeted, doodled. "The study of sociology is meaningless as long as it remains an impersonal chapter in a textbook." In the back of the room, dressed the preppy, sat Ken, who leaned over and whispered covertly to a pal. "Bob, is he about to say what I think he's going to say?" "That is why," the professor said, droning on, "rather than have you write dull old research papers, I have arranged for all of you to intern with various social service organizations." Groans from the class. "You'll find it takes no more time than a term paper, but it's far more gratifying. Now, there are a variety of internships available, so come up and let's coordinate our schedules." "This stinks," groaned Ken quietly, as the students shuffled to the clipboard at the front of the room. "Why didn't I sign up for Logan's section?" "Because Logan's a killer," said his friend Bob. "When they turned him down for tenure, he started flunking everybody." A girl in front of them gushed as she hovered over the list. "Oh, I can't wait to be a big sister. It's going to be so neat helping people." Ken rolled his eyes and studied the clipboard. "Let's see. Soup line for the homeless. Oh, no way. Why don't they just get jobs and buy their own soup is what I want to know. Public clinic. Oh, no, I'm not contracting AIDS." "I'm signing up for candlelighters," said Bob. Ken pulled his Bic from his pocket protector. "Wait, isn't that kids with cancer, Bob? What a downer. Why would you sign up for that? I'm going for the old folks' home. I figure most of them are senile. I'll recite from my econ text, and that way I can study, and they'll think I'm reading them a bedtime story." Ken signed his name by Glenvale Old Folks' Home, and he shook his head. "I can't believe this is happening to me." Glenvale Old Folks' Home. Harvey was lounging at the nurse's station, flirting with a buxom young nurse who was not trying very hard to fend off his advances. Harvey gazed at her unabashedly in lust. Man, am I lucky. Working all day with a sexy nurse, and the only competition is over 70. Nurse Vaughn leaned closer. Hey, never underestimate the competition. Some of these old guys can be pretty charming. Nurse Vaughn, do you believe in reincarnation? Because I'm sure we've met before, but it can't have been in this life, or we'd already be married. She giggled when suddenly a loud buzzer went off and Harvey jumped. What in the...
Dinner bell. That way the residents know when it's time to eat. Most of them are coherent, very coherent, but a few of them... Suddenly, a little old man came barreling down the hall in his wheelchair, speeding by the nurse's station and yelling at the top of his lungs. Raid! It's a raid! Flush the booze, hide the cards, and for Christ's sake, tell the girls to put some clothes on! And then the old guy wheeled around the corner and was gone as quickly as he'd come. Nurse Vaughn looked at Harvey and shrugged. He, ran a speakeasy during Prohibition, owned the finest burlicue houses in New York City, but the police popped him a lot. Loud noises do that to him. Poor old Artie. Harvey chuckled, then heard the carping voice of Nurse Pritchard's around the corner. He winked a goodbye to Nurse Vaughn and then hurried into Mr. Howard's room, carrying a stack of fresh sheets. He stopped and stared sadly at Mr. Howard, who sat in his wheelchair looking out the window, mute. He saw Harvey out of the corner of his eye, but did not react. And then Nurse Pritchard's came in. She was about 35, blonde, and might have been pretty if she would just have taken a moment to loosen her tight, matronly bun or change her pursed expression for a smile. But this was something that Nurse Pritchard's did not do very often. She took out 2 blue rubber balls from her pockets. How are we this morning, Mr. Howard? Go away. Good morning, Nurse Pritchard's lovely day. This not from Mr. Howard, but Harvey, who, being unemployed and irresponsible, was naturally in a good mood almost all the time. Nurse Pritchard's did not respond. She turned to the old man, grinning too brightly, her white teeth huge. Mr. Howard, see what I have? It's time to squeeze our balls. I want my snack. You can have your snack later. First, your exercises. Don't want to. Oh, don't be such a grump. Active hands are happy hands. She took her balls and started squeezing them with vigor. And squeeze, and 1, and squeeze, and 2, and squeeze. Mr. Howard, you aren't squeezing. Harvey left and wheeled his cart down the hall, chuckling at her. Let's try it again, Mr. Howard, and squeeze, and 1, and... 20 minutes later, Harvey was still pushing his cart. Headphones were clamped to his ears, and he whistled classical music. Harvey stopped at a residence room he had never been in before and knocked. Hello, excuse me. Would you like your room cleaned? No answer. Harvey went in, emptied the trash, then grabbed the Lysol and a towel. He stopped. On the bed was a box. Sitting on top was a scrapbook filled with black and white photos. Depression pictures, war pictures, extermination camp liberation pictures, 60s protest pictures. Harvey picked up a yellowed newspaper with a 1929 headline about the stock market crash. Beneath it was a photograph of a man leaping from a building. Harvey was stunned. What in blazes are you doing? Harvey whirled around. An old woman studied him. She wore a dress with a large cameo at the neck. Her eyes were piercingly beautiful, and her hair was coiffed in a perfect Gibson girl. Harvey shuffled and stammered and tried to scurry out with his cart. I was just only... Harvey saw her looking right into his eyes, her eyes piercing his soul. He shrugged and grinned winningly. Ma'am, I was snooping. I can see that, you little turd. That much is obvious. Well, if it's so obvious, ma'am, why'd you ask? Smart-ass. I'm telling Dr. Goldblum. No, ma'am, please. He already hates me. I'll leave. Consider me gone. I'm out of here. I'm a vapor. Snot.
What were you looking for? Something to steal?
No, ma'am. The truth is, those photographs, they're amazing.
Of course they are. I was published worldwide.
Ma'am, you took those?
Damn right. For 40 years I was a photojournalist, one of the best.
Well, that's impressive, ma'am. I'd like to hear more about that.
You lying toad. Don't patronize an old lady.
No, I mean it, ma'am. Any time you're ready to talk.
Well, if you could sneak me a pint of gin, I just might. This place is as dry as a Prohibition rally.
Harvey reached into the dirty linens and pulled out a fresh bottle of gin. This is for Mr. Howard, but he can wait.
Well, that's more like it, young man. Get a couple of glasses and sit down. Well, what the hell are you waiting for? World peace?
Taken aback, Harvey fetched a couple of plastic cups from his cart and poured. As Elvira seated herself in her wicker chair, Harvey pulled a photo from the stack. Ma'am, this newspaper, the big crash, you took this picture?
Of course not. That was 1929. How old do you think I am? But I was there when it was taken. Oh, I was there, all right. Pour a bit more in my glass. Yes, that's better.
And now we must dissolve to the past. An elegant home in New York City. A living room opulent but warm. On a mahogany table is a towering stack of boxes. A little girl, 12, with long flowing hair and huge eyes, fidgets as her mother, a prim and pretty woman in a lavender silk gown, ties a sash on the little girl's dress. But before we dive completely into the past, imagine that old but sweet, crackly voice, as old and sweet and crackly as an old phonograph record. Imagine Elvira Peachtree Callahan's voice easing us back into the past. Specifically, October 24th, 1929.
Oh, I see it vividly, like it happened 20 years ago instead of 60. We were going abroad. Mother decided Papa was working too hard and that the three of us should summer in Europe. For weeks, she'd been filling my head with stories of the magical places we'd visit. London Bridge, the Eiffel Tower, and fields of flowers in the south of France where perfume was made. City plazas with pigeons and clocks with gold faces.
As her mother tried to tie the bow on the waist of her dress, the little girl fidgeted.
Will we be on the boat a long time, Mama?
A week, dear. Now stop fidgeting. I have to see if this fits.
I hate this big bow. It makes me feel like a package. Can I go play with my dollhouse now?
May I go play with my dollhouse? There was a knock on the front door. The mother bustled over, opened the door, and smiled. A handsome young man with a sad expression stood there, his hat in his hands. And here was what was oddest about his good looks. If you could have been transported from the past back to the present, you would have said that Andrew and Harvey were identical twins. And listen carefully to this, dear readers, that they looked exactly alike is absolutely crucial to our plot, and to the miracle that is the truth of this love story. So, where were we? Andrew's face was somber. Mother took his briefcase. Andrew, you look grim.
Andrew, come look at my dollhouse. Mother and I went out and got a love seat for the parlor and a little family.
Not now, Elvira. He's here for Father. Andrew, I am so worried he never comes out. He sleeps in there, eats in there. Mother knocked gently on the study door.
Darling, it's Andrew.
Andrew walked in. A haggard man standing at the window looked at Andrew. Is it bad? Andrew nodded grimly. Sit down, Andrew. Tell me the worst of it. The study door shut, and Mother, preoccupied, turned her attention back to Elvira.
Please, Mama, can I play with my dollhouse now?
Oh, all right. We'll try the other dresses on later. In the study, Andrew was worriedly watching Elvira's father as he perused the papers, took in the bad news that he was wiped out. He looked up at his personal assistant, who was staring right at him. "Please, leave now, Andrew. I'd like to be alone." "Well, if you insist, sir, but I'll be at the office if you need me for anything, at all." Father stared at the papers, not looking up as Andrew nodded and left. In the next room, Elvira was happily unwrapping her dollhouse family. Andrew went to the door, turning to Elvira's mother. "Ma'am, you better keep an eye on him." And he left, shutting the door behind him. Mother paced, absently curling loose wisps of hair with her fingers. She saw Andrew's briefcase sitting on the sofa. "Oh, dear. Elvira, be a good girl and run take Andrew's briefcase to him." Elvira took it and scurried out. Mother stared at the study door. Elvira ran out into the sunshine and looked down the street, then saw Andrew coming back towards their apartment. "Hello, beautiful. I was just coming back for that."
You left without looking at my dollhouse.
"Maybe some other time, sweetheart. Today isn't—" Andrew stopped uncertainly, noticing the buzz of a gathering crowd. He looked up to see what they were staring at. Elvira followed his gaze. A man was standing on the ledge of their apartment building. It was Elvira's father. Andrew gasped. "Oh, God!" Without warning, Elvira's father jumped, his cry drowned out by screams of the crowd. Andrew heard the pop of a flashbulb. He grabbed the camera from the eager photographer, then suddenly found himself in the middle of a fist fight. Some people joined in the brawl, others clustered in horror around the dead man, and nobody noticed Elvira standing in the middle of it all, sobbing. "Harvey, there you are! Now, jerk yourself out of the past, too fast, uncomfortably so, and look around. You are back in the cold, stark, sterile nursing home, although Elvira Peachtree Callahan has done the best she can to make her room look homey. But Nurse Pritchard's standing in the door frame, hands on hips, did not add to the warmth as she glowered at idle Harvey, who had been listening, rapt, to Elvira's story, whose last memory of her father had just been interrupted by the Nazi-esque Nurse Pritchard's. "Harvey," snapped Nurse Pritchard's, "when are you going to get to the rest of the rooms?" Harvey looked at Nurse Pritchard's, who tapped her foot impatiently. Then he looked at Elvira. "We'll continue this later then, gorgeous?" "Continue what later?" Nurse Pritchard's butted in. "And why do you two look so sneaky?" Later that night, a sweet little bistro. Ken was telling his girlfriend the bad news about the stint in Glenvale. Lisa was visibly shaken. Their engaged-to-be engagement was not going at all as she had envisioned it, not at all. "This is horrible," she pouted. "Every afternoon?" "I told you, hon, I didn't have any choice. Besides, you work afternoons, too. What's the difference?" Lisa crossed her arms, absently making her breasts squeeze together. She was wearing an Angora sweater. She loved Angora. But she was not thinking about that now. She was thinking about the thought of her soon-to-be fiancé emptying bedpans instead of interning at the most prestigious law firm in town, as they had originally discussed. Ken saw his beloved's furrowed brow and absent stare. "Lisa, I asked you a question. What's the difference?" "Well, Ken, it's different because A, I get paid, B, half of what I make goes to our townhouse fund, and C, I work in a boutique. But Glenvale? I mean, exactly what do? You don't empty bedpans, do you?" "God, no, Lisa. I just take food trays around, tell them what year it is if they ask, that kind of thing." "But Ken, I still don't get it. What about your job interning for Mr. Briggs? I thought it was all arranged." "Look, I spoke to him today. He was very nice about it. I'm just putting it off a month. I start in October." Lisa shook her head, vigorously stirring her frozen margarita with her straw. I can't believe this is happening to us."
As Ken was telling Lisa the bad news, a few blocks away, Harvey was trotting around the back of a run-down Victorian to his rented room. Harvey whistled his way up the steps, carrying a fast food bag, and he fished for his keys. He jiggled them in the lock. Nothing happened. He tried again. Now that's odd. What in the... A window on the second floor opened, and his landlady, Mrs. Bitcombe, stuck her head out.
Forget it! I changed the locks.
But Mrs. Bitcombe,
You're 3 months behind on the rent. You're out.
Mrs. Bitcombe, Betty, honey, you gotta be kidding. We're friends. I mean, what about all we've shared?
You should have shared the damn rent.
But I put up your drapes. I wallpapered your bathroom. I helped you host that Mary Kay party. I looked for your bird when it flew off. I found it even. I climbed a tree to rescue it.
I want my $430 back rent. Now!
But, Betty, you know I'm a little strapped at the moment.
Off my front stoop or I call the cops.
But my stuff.
It's out on the back porch. I packed for you.
The window slammed shut. Harvey stamped his foot and cursed at the window. But I was good for you. Every night I listened to your endless stories about your ex-husband. That's worth at least $400. Well, 10 minutes later, Harvey was struggling with his suitcase and backpack. His fast food bag broke, splattering Tex-Mex everywhere. The upstairs window opened again, and Mrs. Bitcombe began ranting again.
And don't leave hot sauce splattered all over my lawn. Last time you did that, it killed the grass.
Glenvale Old Folks' Home, a semi-dark hallway. Harvey checked to make sure the coast was clear. He ninja'd down the hall, slipped into the supply closet. He stashed his things, got out a cot, and grabbed a pillow. He lay on the bed and stared dejected at the shelves. Bedpans, toilet paper, ace bandages, industrial cleaner. How had his life come to this pass? He opened his bag, got out a Walkman, and put in a tape. The Foray Requiem began to play, and he drifted into a world of his own. Dissolved to dawn. Harvey opened a sleepy eye and sat up, startled. Voices! The janitor and, oh no, Nurse Pritchard's. Oh, ma'am, they're in the supply closet. Well, get me 2 dozen. But, ma'am, I gotta finish the floors. Oh, hurry, I can't wait all day. Harvey threw his clothes on. He opened the door, peered out. He sauntered to the nurse's station. Nurse Pritchard studied her clipboard. Good morning, Commandant, said Harvey. She eyed him. You're here awfully early. You know what they say, ma'am. Early to bed, early to rise. Well, the bedpans are waiting, so get on with it. And then Nurse Pritchard caught a whiff of Harvey as he passed. Good Lord, don't you ever bathe? We do have cleanliness codes, you know. Harvey bristled, experiencing a rare moment of embarrassment, and headed into Mr. Howard's room, first one at the end of the hall, to begin his chores. Mr. Howard sat in his chair, as always, staring out the window at nothing, as always. Mr. Howard didn't even react when he heard, coming from his bathroom a few minutes later, the robust voice of Italian opera. Harvey came out wearing one towel and drying his hair with another towel, still singing. Howie, I thank you for the use of your shower. Mr. Howard just stared. Harvey looked at him sadly. Then he dressed and returned to his chores, deep in thought. But he was whistling again by the time that Nurse Pritchard hurried around the corner, almost running into him. She eyed him suspiciously. She was always eyeing him suspiciously, it seemed.
Done with those bedpans yet, Harvey?
Just getting ready to start, ma'am. And then Nurse Pritchard sniffed Harvey and sniffed him again, noticing something different about him now. She stared after him as he sashayed down the hall. For a moment she just stood there, shaking her head, then switched gears back into her business-as-usual mode. She went into Mr. Howard's room, smiling artificially. "Ready to squeeze our balls, Mr. Howard?" She glanced in the bathroom, noticing that the mirror was steamed up. Harvey wheeled his cart by, still singing Italian opera. Nurse Pritchard stared after him. Meanwhile, back in Dr. Goldblum's office, the doctor was getting out of his seat, coming around the desk, and vigorously shaking hands with Ken. Affable Ken, of the high GPA, with his respectful attitude towards his elders. Dr. Goldblum immediately liked this young man, who wore a sweater vest and a tie and had good posture and reeked of Levoris. "Son, it's always good to have young people from the campus. We're just one big happy family here. Oh, Nurse Pritchard is at the nurse's station. She'll fill you in." "Thank you, sir," said Ken. "I look forward to it." A few minutes later, Ken was trotting down the hall, looking at his roster of duties and muttering. He heard laughter coming from the rec room. He peered in. A gaggle of old ladies were gathered around a guy who was entertaining them by juggling cotton balls. A sweet-faced old lady with the reddest dyed hair Ken had ever seen clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, this is better than the circus!" "Oh, yes," chimed in a cotton-candy blue-haired one. "And I was in the circus, remember, so I should know." The charismatic young juggler, it was Harvey, of course, winked at the old biddies. "Okay, just for Hermione, cotton balls and a bedpan." Harvey grabbed a bedpan and worked it into the act. Applause from the ladies. Ken chuckled as he watched from a distance. "Ain't nothing," gummed a woman wearing ornate shell jewelry that dangled from her ears, around her neck and wrists, even her hair. "My husband, Pete, he juggled machetes." "No knives today, ladies," said Harvey, "but here's something much more dangerous." And in one swift movement, Harvey put down the cotton balls and the bedpans and picked up 3 lidded plastic containers from a tray on the table. "Urine samples from the men's ward." The ladies oohed and awed. Ken howled with laughter, drawing attention to himself and making Harvey drop the samples. One splattered, and the ladies all wheeled back quickly. "Danger, Will Robinson! Ladies, I will return in a second with a mop." Harvey walked up to Ken, smiling wryly. "Okay, who the hell are you, and why did you ruin my act?" "Oh, Kenneth Wenzel, here for an internship, public service work." "Good to know you. I'm Harvey. I'll show you around." Actually, the doctor said that a Nurse Pritchard—" "Are you kidding? That immaculate conception? Stay away from her. So what do you do to get a stint in this place, huh? DWI? Shoplifting? Vandalism, huh?" "No, I took a liberal arts course. Big mistake. I wanted to take theories of banking, but no." And so that is how Harvey and Ken got to know each other. Harvey giving Ken the lowdown on, well, everything, as he mopped up the spill from his nearly magnificent juggling performance. The afternoon dragged by, reluctant to give itself over to the night. Through the windows, a beautiful sunset. Most of the patients were in their rooms for the night, and the halls were quiet. Harvey tiptoed down the dimly lit hallway to Elvira's room, knocked, and poked his head in. She was studying the sunset with great intensity. "Oh, hello. Harvey, I didn't expect to see you again." "But I told you I'd come to hear the rest of the story." "Oh, folks always say they'll come back to listen and visit, but they never do, my dear." Harvey took the chair next to her, sat down, and looked not at her, but at the same sunset that was absorbing her. "Well, Elvira, I'm here now." "Exquisite sunset, isn't it?" "Look, the story you were telling me, it can't be easy to talk about. If you'd rather not—" No, I'll finish. "That photo that the man took of Father, yes, it was published in the paper, but I didn't see it till years later. But nothing was the same after that day. In a single moment, everything changed." And we dissolve to the past again. The funeral of Elvira's father. A black day. Elvira, morbid in dark taffeta and pale as milk, sits between Andrew and Mother. Mother is medicated, her eyes glazed.
The preacher is dull as dishwater. He takes forever to finish his eulogizing. And when it is finally over, they all rise to leave. Elvira's mother is very jittery. Andrew whispers to a friend, "Ruth, get her home. I'll take care of Elvira." Central Park. It is a glorious day, if that counts for anything. Andrew and Elvira were sitting on a bench. She was mute and stared at the trees. And after a silence, Andrew finally spoke. "Elvira, I cried for hours after it. I thought the world of him. I wanted to be just like your father." But Elvira said nothing. Andrew looked at her, worried. "Elvie, somebody told me you haven't cried a single tear since your father died." "I'm not going to either." "I'll make you a deal. How about if you tell me the thing you remember most about your dad, and I'll tell you what I remember most?" Elvira said nothing, fighting back tears. "Well, okay, what I remember most, Elvira, was his sense of humor. You know, he loved to play jokes on people, and then he'd laugh this big, loud belly laugh you could hear for a mile." Elvira smiled just a bit, but said nothing. "Well, in fact, I remember one Christmas we had a party at your father's office. Turns out he went to a doctor friend and got this secret chemical that makes your piss turn blue, and he put it in the punch at the party." Elvira giggled. "The old doc said he didn't get a moment's peace on Christmas Day. Folks kept coming over, moaning about blue piss. They were all afraid they were going to die, but your father just laughed." Andrew and Elvira both chuckled together, and then their laugh faded. He looked down at her. "It's your turn." And then she smiled ever so slightly. "Well, Father would tell stories about witches and dragons and unicorns. Once when I was little, a man came with a big box. Mother was excited. It was a chandelier. I'd never seen one, and when it was time for dinner, the chandelier was all lit up, 100 sparkly lights. I asked Papa how it got that way, and he said the fairies did it. My favorite thing was to sit in the dining room when Father was drinking his brandy and Mother writing her letters, and I would wait for the fairies to come." Andrew smiled at Elvira and pushed her long curls away from her face. "Elvie, would you like another one? I mean, for your very own?" Elvira looked at him in disbelief. "I'm serious. Come on, take my hand." And now, imagine a beautiful chandelier, and then imagine little Elvira squinting at it in amazement, studying the detail, the warm glow from the chandelier making her face glow too, her grief temporarily forgotten. But now, imagine that Elvira's face is huge against the chandelier, 10 times as big as the chandelier is. And now, as we get the whole picture, we see that it is a miniature nestled among other miniatures in the most magnificent dollhouse store Elvira has ever seen. The shopkeeper gently removes it from the case and puts it in a box. And later that afternoon, Andrew helped her hang it in her dollhouse, then attached all the wires so that even as the sunset was losing light through the windows outside, a warm glow emanated from the dollhouse as Elvira and Andrew sat and stared at it. Andrew smiled down at Elvira's beaming face. As so, in the present, Harvey smiled down at Elvira's beaming face as she moved on with her story, a far-away look in her eyes. "Dear Andrew was a great comfort to me. But shortly after the funeral, I was shipped off to Yonkers to live with my dear Aunt Haggie." And so little Elvira found herself dressed in a hideous brown calico dress, with way too much starch chafing her, and an equally horrible straw hat with too wide a brim plopped on her head and tied under her chin, practically choking her. She stood in a huge cavernous foyer, a terrified look on her face. "Dear Aunt Haggie," said old Elvira, remembering. "Short for Agatha, but long for Hag, if you asked me." A grim woman in gray approached little Elvira, who was waiting in the dark foyer. Aunt Agatha offered her chalky cheek for a kiss, and Elvira gave her a peck. Aunt Agatha took Elvira's hand, and they started up the shadowy staircase. "What about your mother?" asked Harvey. "I wasn't sure. The grown-ups wouldn't talk to me about it. They was whispering, folks studying me with great concern. I found out she'd been put in an asylum. Years later, Aunt Aggie told me Mother had gone to join Father in heaven. Did she jump from a building, too? I had asked Aunt Agatha, who was appalled." Harvey leaned his chin in his hands, listening as Elvira stared into her distant memories. "Under Aunt Haggie's strict tutelage, I learned to act like a lady. I went to school, did my lessons, and every afternoon at 4, Aunt Aggie and I took tea. She'd ask me what I'd learned. Oh, and there was her dreadful cat Falstaff, a huge, ugly, yellow cat, always hissing, always watching." Dissolve to the past, the sun porch. Little Elvira sat on the sun porch drinking tea as Aunt Agatha and Falstaff the cat watched. Whenever Aunt Agatha looked away, Elvira would steal a sugar cube, which the cat saw, and Elvira stuck her tongue out at the cat. Oh, dreadful times they were! But I looked forward to 2 days each year. Without fail, birthday and Christmas, a box arrived addressed to Miss Elvira Peachtree, from Mr. Andrew Callahan. I had a crush on him, although he never came to see me. He traveled Europe, writing his newspaper stories, and he'd send romantic pictures of Venice, London, Paris, even Tokyo, the vacation I never had. And Harvey never forgot. No, I mean Andrew never forgot. Excuse me, dear. Little Elvira stood leaning against the mailbox, studying the pictures of exotic ports of call, fascinated. "What about the packages?" asked Harvey. "What was in them?" Little Elvira unwrapped a tiny package. Inside was a teeny commode. "Oh, inside each package was a piece for my dollhouse. One year it was a piano made of ebony with keys painted by hand. One year it was a bathroom set with a porcelain tub with brass feet and a sink with brass faucets. Once it was a 4-poster bed with a canapé of rose silk and a quilt made of bits of calico the size of my thumbnail. Oh, and once from Paris, the tiniest hand-painted reproduction of Van Gogh's sunflowers." Little Elvira decorated her dollhouse with its newest additions. "I lived in that house. I believed in it so much. Sometimes I thought I was mad, like Mother had gone mad. I had my dollhouse family, and I was the mother, and Andrew was the father in my fantasies. I had a boy and a baby girl. I'd sit in the nursery by the light of the lamp, and I sang Geoffrey to sleep. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Mama's gonna sing you a lullaby." As back in the present, Elvira looked at Harvey and saw the lullaby had put him to sleep. He slouched in the rocker, snoring quietly, exhausted from his events of the last 48 hours. Elvira smiled. "Good night, my dear. Sleep well." A beautiful morning. Elvira sat wakeful, watching Harvey snore in the chair. The breakfast bell went off down the hall. Harvey jumped. He looked around, disoriented. "Oh, Elvira, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sleep here all night." "You were so peaceful, dear. I didn't want to disturb you." "Did I snore? I did, didn't I?" "It was nice to sleep with the sound of a man snoring again, dear." The buzzer was still going off as residents wheeled, hobbled, and made their way down the hall with their walkers. Artie whizzed by all of them in his motorized wheelchair. "Bolt all the doors! Tell Gabby to lock up the safe! Knock on all the doors in the back hall! Tell the men to get their pants on, and for Christ's sake, tell the girls to cover their titties, damn it to hell!" Harvey and Elvira just looked at each other and laughed. 20 minutes later, Harvey had taken one of his covert showers and was back on duty, ready to start emptying bedpans and changing sheets. Harvey peered into Mr. Howard's room, watching Nurse Pritchard struggle with Mr. Howard. "Mr. Howard, I know the exercises hurt, but you must do them or your hands will get worse."
"Piss off! When the heck you gonna stop bugging me?"
"Mr. Howard, I'll make a deal with you. Just take the ball in your hand, hold it for a minute, and that will be all for today, all right?" Mr. Howard grabbed the ball from Nurse Pritchard's and tossed it into the hall. It knocked over an ashtray. She sighed. Harvey, peering in, just shook his head. He hoisted a bag of trash over his shoulder, trudged out back. He shivered. It was snowing. When had that started? This morning it had seemed almost balmy. Now suddenly he was freezing. He zipped his thin jacket and climbed up to empty the trash. And that was when he heard meow. He peered around the bin and saw a tiny kitten yowling. He picked it up, tucking it into his jacket. "Hey, little guy, what are you doing out here? Couldn't you pay your rent either?" The kitten yowled, cold and hungry. And then Harvey had an idea. He darted down the hall and slipped into Mr. Howard's room. "Howie." No response from Mr. Howard, who sat in a funk. "Howie, look what I found crawling around outside." Harvey pulled the kitten from his jacket. "Look, it can't be more than a month old. You want to hold him?" Mr. Howard scowled at Harvey.
"Is it lunch yet?"
Harvey watched Mr. Howard stare bitterly at the wall. He smiled casually, petting the poor kitten.
"Gosh, Howard, I can't take him home."
"See, I don't have a home. Guess I'll take him to the pound. Too bad, they'll just gas him, though." Harvey put the kitten in Mr. Howard's lap and started cleaning.
"Hold him while I clean, please."
And then, ever so slowly, one of the gnarled hands moved to cradle the kitten. Harvey, whistling idly as he swept, watched Mr. Howard out of the corner of his eye.
"Yeah, a little guy like that,
I bet you could keep him here and that old bat Pritchard's would never know." A slow grin crept over Mr. Howard's face.
"Something mighty appealing, Mr. Howard, about putting one over on Pritchard's, don't you think?"
The cat purred happily. Harvey smiled. Mr. Howard was using his hands again. Later, down in the hall, in Artie's room, Harvey popped in to change the sheets, amused to see that Artie Stern was using his old arthritic hands again, too, but in a different sort of way. Artie was always pleasuring himself, and as it seemed to keep him happy and quiet, nobody bothered him about it, not even Nurse Pritchard's, who only closed the door leading to the main hallway so as not to involve the rest of the world. When Harvey peeked in, fresh towels in hand, and saw what Artie was up to, he unobtrusively continued wheeling his cart so as not to disrupt Artie's rhythm, but was startled when he heard Artie bellowing.
"Towel, boy! I need a towel! Gonna deliver my linens or not?"
Harvey swallowed a chuckle, turned his cart around, and went in, whistling idly and glancing here and there around the room, trying to discreetly not notice as Artie toweled off his Jimmy Dean and tucked it back in, struggling with the zipper and muttering to Harvey.
"I don't know how the hell we're going to keep our girls in nylons with this damn war rationing."
"How many times do I have to tell you, Artie, I got black market connections," said Harvey, who had learned from long experience that not only was this the only way to keep Artie calm, but it was a way to give Artie a reason to go on living. This and $1.29 at Walmart for some black thigh-highs, and Artie was as happy as he'd been in decades. As Harvey wheeled his cart out, he stopped at a picture on the bureau, a scantily clad lady posing with a dapper man, autographed, "With love, Bonnie." "Hey, where'd you get this?" said Harvey, picking up the photo.
"Hey, punk, put that down!"
"Is this you with this lady? Well, I'll be damned." Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Ken was muttering to nobody in particular, spooning glop onto the trays for lunch, when Harvey burst in, out of breath.
"Ken, I gotta borrow your car."
Not even if it would help the space program. Well, then you gotta give me a ride someplace. Forget it. I'm studying all afternoon, and then I have a date with Lisa. Ken, listen. I just talked to Nurse Vaughn. Artie Stern hasn't had a visitor since 1991. I mean, think about it. Reagan was in office. Poor Artie. His relatives are dead. He gets loonier every day, but I think I know just the person who can help. As he jabbered, Harvey was picking at the stuffing that Ken had made to go with the pressed turkey. Harvey made a face. Needs a hint of time, Ken. Anyway, this lady who I think can cheer up poor Artie, she's a lovely lady, this woman I need to pick up with your borrowed car, Ken. She's very motherly. She owns her own business. She knows Artie from way back, and I bet she'd love to see him. Ken sighed. He was sick of kitchen duty anyway, and he needed some fresh air. Okay, I suppose it's the decent thing. What does she do, anyway? Ken asked, taking off his still spotless apron and hanging it neatly on a hook. She works with animals, said Harvey, grabbing Ken's coat for him and hurrying out the door. The Neon Room was the local strip joint, and although Ken put up quite a protest, he did allow Harvey to drag him in there, thinking to himself that this was the first and last time he'd ever allow himself to be taken to such a place. He was, after all, engaged to be engaged. The place was almost a cliché of itself, smoke-filled and populated by guys pleasantly buzzed from their afternoon beers. On stage, a seasoned stripper gyrated to classic burlesque, out of place in this club of neon and chrome. She danced with a live boa constrictor, using it in all kinds of imaginative ways. Harvey pulled Ken through the crowd and grabbed a couple of seats. Ken glared at Harvey. Works with animals, huh? Harvey smiled, never taking his eyes off the stage. Yeah, isn't Bonnie great? Well, geez, isn't she afraid the snake will bite? Asked Ken. It's a boa constrictor, stupid. They don't bite, they constrict. Yeah, but look at the size of that thing. It's huge. Yeah, I guess you can see why after dancing with that thing 20 years, she won't settle down and get married. The dance ended. Bonnie and her boa jiggled off stage. Ken's eyes darted nervously around the smoky room. Lisa'd kill me if she knew I ever came to a place like this. Yeah, well, Lisa's a highly repressed individual. Hey, I don't appreciate that, Harvey. Appreciate this, then, said Harvey, nodding towards the stage. She's more your speed, Ken, young and sassy. A scantily clad nymph started dancing to a bebop tune. She swung on a pole in the runway, using it for a variety of sexy gymnastics. Ken nodded appreciatively in spite of himself. She is very limber. A thing of beauty is a joy forever, my friend, said Harvey, taking $1 and waving it at the girl, then gesturing over at Ken. She nodded, winked, danced over. She thrust her pelvis in Ken's face and draped her boa around Ken's neck and squatted. Harvey, make her stop. You know I'm allergic to feathers. No, I want you to have one last good time before you settle down and get married. The thought of you two anal retentives building a life together scares me, said Harvey, and Ken squeezed out from the boa feathers. Harvey shook his head. Come backstage with me, Ken. You're going to love Bonnie. She's great. Harvey leapt up, Ken following reluctantly, but as they wended their way towards the back, Harvey was stopped by a beefy bouncer. Hey, where the hell you think you're going, pal? Hi, I'm here to see Bonnie. So's everyone else, but I ain't letting them backstage. Oh, okay, wait, I know this. The name of the boa is Clarence. Hey, buddy, you know the password. Well, why didn't you say so? I'll escort you personally. Come on. Harvey and Ken followed the bouncer backstage, passing a bizarre array of strippers limbering up. Clarence? Asked Ken, looking at Harvey. The snake is named after her grandfather. She's very sentimental. Now try not to act like an ass. Harvey looked at Ken, and then suddenly Bonnie opened her dressing room door and gave Harvey a hug. And that is when Clarence dropped his head down from where he was lounging, wrapped around the biggest piece of driftwood you've ever seen.
Ken screamed. Harvey and Bonnie laughed. Ken was so easily startled by the world, but they would change all that. They exchanged a wink while Ken collected himself.